So, hello everyone. I hope everything is working and welcome to the stream. So, first of all, let's do a small recap of the things that we have done in the previous week. So, long story short, we were talking about 1-point perspective and 2-point perspective and some basic exercises and whatnot. And there are some questions that I would like to cover before we start talking about the ellipses, because today we will just pretty much talk about the ellipses. So there are 3 questions from Dog on Dog Action, and let's cover 2 and 3 at first, or just let's them remove them because I will cover these topics in the next videos. So let's say I use human as model for the main shape. Now I have the outline of a human with maybe some hair on the face, and now I want to create a character out of that with a sword, armor, floating cape, and so on. How do I draw all the assets in the proper perspective, fit into the character shape? Basically, this thing will get covered while we will be drawing some figures. But the long story short is basically if you draw a box, you need to just imagine how the things overlay on top of it. So to put it simply, if you have something like this, let's say this is a part of our box or whatever, basically everything that you want to draw on top of it will, let's say, go like this, or maybe like this. So then you can like create a shape out of it. I guess it will be a little bit more clearly explained with the videos about cross-section and everything. But this is the basic idea. Like you simply just take out the geometry from the shape, and that's pretty much all. Nothing really too fancy is happening in here. So yeah. So let's say this one is kind of done. Foreshortening will be purely done in the like one video, because this is like the entire topic that deserves a different like a video on its own. Long story short is also, if you have, for example, a cylinder, also a thing that we will talk about today, viewed from the side. So this is basically a rectangle, and from the front it will look more or less like this. So if we were to put a perspective in it, so let's say show it only slightly, then this thing would behave more or less like this. If we say this is a nice drawing. Hello, Nightbird. And if we were to show it a little bit more up front, then it will get shorter and the ellipses will get a little bit more visible. But as I said, this is something that I will cover, or I will try to cover today. So the more I will show it, the more of the bottom and the top part I will show, basically the shorter it will become. So this will be this one. And the question that is actually kinda like the most interesting at the moment and will kinda be helpful, I guess, at this moment, is the first one, because it's about the horizon line. So basically, where do you put it and whatnot. Long story short for this is, if you have like a canvas or something like this, you can put your horizon line pretty much wherever you want. So we will have like 2 scenarios in here. So let's say it will look like this. Boom. So if you have like a horizon in here, you can place your character like in here. If we say that the character like view is like the character height is on the horizon line, so this is like a one scenario. So basically you have a lot of sky and not that much of a ground level to cover. You can also have like a horizon line in here. So now there will be more emphasis on the characters, because they simply will be bigger, more ground, less sky will be visible. But also you can do something that is kinda a mix of those two. So you can have like a horizon in here, but we can say that the eye level, so the horizon line, is on the height of the pelvis, for example. So this kind of means that the character, let's say in here, will look like this, and the character in here will look like this. And this is basically just like drawing different lines to help yourself with all the things that is happening in here. So pretty much this is the way to draw different views and different like height of the of the horizon line. So, but I will cover this topic a little bit more in depth in the videos that are related to creating like your first drawing or something like this. So really cool questions, but the number 2 and number 3, as I said, I will elaborate a little bit more pretty much later. So let's go for today's topic, because today I would like to talk with you about the ellipses. So long story short, the ellipses are actually one of the most terrifying things to draw, especially for beginner artists, because they are extremely hard to draw. Especially on a graphic tablet, if you are like using some sort of a vacuum or something like this, it's extremely hard to draw a nice ellipse, because this movement, like moving a hand in a like circular way, is extremely unnatural. Maybe a small circle is nice, but even if I will try to draw it like many different times, then it still won't look really that good. So basically, a thing for you is to go a little bit slower and maybe to try to draw it with a little uglier quality, but try to draw it a bit nicer. So as I can see, the square that I'm drawing is a little bit too short. But yeah, this is basically the way to draw ellipses. You pretty much don't. They're hard as hell, and you really should practice them quite a lot. As I said, drawing them on the graphic tablet is extremely hard. So basically, this is the first exercise that you should be doing pretty much daily. On paper, it's way easier to do. Is basically try to sketch ellipses all the way in different angles. Try to rotate them, try to draw like a really thin ellipses, try to draw really fat ellipses. Everything that will be practice will be pretty much fine. But as you can see, the quality of those lines are not really that great, because it's, as I said, kind of unnatural to draw on the graphic tablet. But it does not stop us from actually training, because also in the Photoshop we can use some tools to help us with drawing the ellipses and circles and whatnot. And most likely you will be using some sort of a 3D as a help if you are going to draw a complex scenes with the ellipses. So this is like the most basic stuff that you should be doing. But for the things of what actually ellipse is, I created this really like basic shape of an ellipse. I don't know if the shape is really readable, so let me bring it down to the blacks. And there's one really cool thing about the ellipses that you can and that you should do pretty much every single time when you are drawing something that is circular. And it means that you can draw a square on top of the ellipse, because you have this like 4 points of tangency. So let's name them like A, B, or let's name them 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can also draw a square, as you can see, that is rotated 45 degrees inside those points. And then you can like draw another like circle inside of it, because then this connection points will be in here, because like the whole circle will also be rotated. And this kind of allows us to pretty much understand what is happening with the circle and with the square on top of it. So basically, if you want to draw an ellipse, the only thing that you need to do is to flatten the circle. So as you can see, I only flattened the whole like drawing inside, and now I have like a pretty much a perfect ellipse drawn that is horizontal to the ground plane. So if we will have a human that is like in here, and he would be viewing like this ellipse, then this ellipse will be visible like this. So in here he would have a point 3, and in here will be 1, and here he'll be 1 equal 2 equals 4, because this is like the view of this ellipse. And in this case, this whole like rectangle around is only there to help, but soon I will show you why it is a really nice way to help yourself while drawing ellipses. Properly, if you would like to draw an ellipse in the perspective, then something like this will happen. So you will have some sort of a plane that will also contain the ellipse inside of this plane. And as you can see, the ellipse pretty much stays exactly the same. We can even match it like to be almost identical. There's a slight difference, but now you also have like a square plane drawn on top like around the ellipse. So this is kind of handy if you really want to draw something that basically is a square, is like 100% square, you will pretty much need to use an ellipse to do so. But if you want to draw a nice ellipse, you might have some problems with it initially, because as I said, drawing ellipses like freehand is not an easy task, and sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. For example, this one is like my favorite angle to draw ellipses, like going upward and like this thick, more or less. But if you are a beginner, it might be really hard to pretty much know if the ellipse that you have drawn is drawn correctly, or if it's not drawn correctly. So the easy way to like try to draw an ellipse for the beginners is to actually draw some sort of a rectangle, because this rectangle will pretty much be our guideline for the whole ellipse. So if we were to find its middle points, we basically will get the 4 points that we were talking about previously. So this will be the point number 1, this will be the point number 2, this will be the point number 3, and this will be the point number 4. The thing with the ellipses is, as you can see, every single like part of the ellipse is basically mirrored. So the left part is a mirror image of the right part, and the top part is the mirror image of the bottom part. So basically every quarter is like a mirrored image of itself. So this is kind of the first rule that you really need to focus on. So everything is mirrored. And now comes the hard part. On the pen and paper it's a bit easier in my opinion to do, but on a graphic tablet is way harder. So we could try to draw it like freehand. So for example, you can draw like 1/4 and then like mirror it and everything should be fine. You can try drawing like the top part first. So let's say something like this. And I kind of split it into the 2 moves, but it does not really matter that much. And you will kind of really need to get used to drawing like ellipses and all this technical stuff in the Photoshop. Or you simply can just like draw a half of it as I did and just duplicate it horizontally. Well, something is really lagging, and you can just draw it Ctrl-Alt-T, and you can just have no idea why this is lagging, to be honest. It should not lag. And you can just draw it like this. If you are not sure if the whole thing is like symmetrical, then you can like remove the bottom part and go with the top part. And this transformation is extremely laggy. I have no idea what is happening. And pretty much boom, you have an ellipse. But as you could see, this took quite a time to do so, and the quality of this line is not really the greatest, so it's not really the best way to draw ellipses. Basically, if you are drawing them in the Photoshop, you can do them freehand, but later most likely you will be using some tool to pretty much help yourself with the whole process of drawing everything. So in here comes the idea of using the ellipse tool. So ellipse edge to the edge, and you will have like a perfect ellipse that also is a vector shape. So this is the best way to actually achieve a really clean looking ellipse in a drawing, but it does not matter. Like, it does not mean we should only like use this tool. It kind of means that we should be like training how to draw them, and then eventually use this tool to help ourselves with the quality of those lines. So let's connect all of this. So basically, one of the greatest exercises that you can do for the ellipses is to actually draw a lot of different planes, like in a different perspectives and whatnot, just to draw some line, to train drawing lines and whatnot and everything. And as you can see, as I said, the quality is not the best, and everything that you will be doing like this, in my opinion, should be drawn freehand, so without any rulers, without anything to help you, basically to train your skills in a good manner. So it will kind of allow you and kind of will force you to learn how to draw properly. And also, if you will like nail down the ability to draw without any type of a help from any type of a software, then everything will pretty much be way easier for you, like later in the process. So you will learn actually how to draw it. So this is basically like the one plan. This is basically the second plan. And the cool thing is, at the moment, these drawings as these like planes are not really a squares, like per se. There's like no way to tell if this is a square or if this is not a square. But if you will actually include an ellipse inside those things, and you will say like the circle that you have drawn inside actually is an ellipse, like it's a circle, and you will follow one thing that will determine the rest of the perspective, then pretty much you will have you will be 100% sure that the ellipse that you have drawn, that the plane that you have drawn is actually a square. So soon I will show you how to pretty much determine it, but this is a really cool like exercise, and as I said, it's extremely way harder to do on the graphic tablet. It kind of sounds like an excuse, and it kind of is, because on a screen tablet I guess it will be way easier. On like a normal old tablet where you don't really look at your hand, it's way harder to do so. But pretty much try drawing a lot of like this type of a thing, is because it will greatly increase the progress that you are making. So basically these are some like ugly ass ellipses, but I hope you get the idea. You can always blame like the bad quality on your style or something like this, which is kind of good. But if you want to kind of draw an ellipse like nicely, you also need to understand the terminology for it. So you will need to understand pretty much what is what if you are using to draw all the ellipses. So let me change the yellow color a bit because it's a bit hard to see. So let's leave it as orange or something like this. So basically, for the terminology that you really need to know, this is the minor axis, this, or the short axis. It's actually easier to use it to term the short axis, and this will be the major axis, or as almost everybody uses, a long axis. The thing is, the short axis and the long axis will always meet exactly in the middle of the ellipse. The long axis is the longest line you can draw in the ellipse that is crossing the middle of an ellipse, and the short axis is the shortest line that you can draw in the ellipse that goes through the middle. The thing with those ellipses is that they are always in relation to each other, that like one of them is always tilted to the 90 degrees in relation to the second one. So pretty much every time that you will be drawing an ellipse and you want to check if everything is correct, if you will like rotate it, or like you will distort it really heavily, or like whatever, like do something like this or do something like this, the relation between those ellipses will always be a 90 degrees. And it kinda, it's really useful because the second, like the short axis, will also lead the second vanishing point for like your drawings. But this is also a thing that I would like to discuss later, because it goes to the creating a perfect like cube in the Photoshop, in the drawing, but we will cover this topic a bit later. But the basic idea of this is, if you were to draw a cylinder out of it, and later we will do just this, the direction of this cylinder should go pretty much like this, because the sides are following the short axis. If you were to draw something, let's say like this, so this will be the short axis, and then you will do something like this, it will mean the thing that you have drawn from the side is like a cylinder that is kind of cut in half. So this thing is not really a circle, this is like an ellipse, because the circle, the cross section of a cylinder to be a circle will look a little bit more like this. So with the small introduction and the small things that you should be doing with the ellipses and how you should train them, so basically just draw as many circles and ellipses and whatnot, just try drawing them like next to each other, just get your hand kinda adjusted and familiar with the feeling of drawing ellipses, then you should go actually to watch how those things work in the real life, because in the real life there are like a lot of different cool ellipses. Most likely you will be using them to draw some sort of circles or some sort of balls and cars and whatever. I guess the wheels are pretty much the most obvious one, like the most obvious things that you are going to, where you are going to use some ellipses. So let me just show you how those ellipses behave in space with the examples of these vehicles. So basically we have some like wheels on the top, we have some like fancy small paper tank and some sort of a motorbike that is also a toy. But let me show you how the ellipse actually behaves. So we will start with drawing a circle, then we will simply like destroy this shape, or we will make it not vector, and then we will try to draw a long and a short axis. Let us copy this, and now we will try to match the ellipse that we have drawn in here to the wheel that we got in here. One thing to remember is when you are like distorting this ellipse, because there are like certain ways you could distort it, is always try to match it to the perspective. So now, as you can see, the short ellipse, as I said previously, is kind of leading the way for our perspective. So this shows the perspective is going pretty much, well, this way. So it kind of leads the way for the cylinder to be drawn like this. So basically this will be a cylinder for the wheels for this like small tank. So here will be the second wheel, and also then we will have like the portion of the ellipse that is actually at the moment invisible, and the long axis will also be at the 90 degrees in relation to this thing. If we were to do it once again with like a different example, let's say in here, then it most likely will look kind of like this. So in here, as you can see, the horizon line looks like this because the bottom part is going slightly up and the top part is going slightly down. So it kind of means the photo was taken in a way where the like short axis also serves as a horizon line. So this is why this ellipse also is vertical. And if you were to place it like in here, this will be a little bit more subtle because this wheel is almost visible like from the front. So we'll kind of need to do small tweaking to let it match the perspective. But the basic idea is if you were like to kind of tweak it along, then the short, it's almost perfect, then the short axis will also guide your perspective. So I needed to kind of like overpaint it, but also there's always a small like margin of error. So this is pretty much how the ellipses work and why you should use them. Also you will see exactly the same thing happening in here. So in here we will draw it like this, and this is basically why this photo looks like this. Every single wheel that is in here has it, only this one is a little bit like smaller, has their like long axis and the short axis acting this way. And in here the thing is a little bit different for this wheel and this wheel, because as you can see, the front part of this motorbike is kind of rotated and the whole thing is kind of also tilted to the sides. So always keep in mind if the ellipse is actually like vertical or if it's tilted, or pretty much how it is really working. So continuing with this one, so for example, if we were to draw something like this tank, or let me just extract one of those tanks in here, or maybe this one because it's drawn from the front. What we should do first is actually try to guess the perspective, or just try to draw the perspective in a way that will be kind of similar. Remember, if you are doing a study, you don't really need to make a perfect copy. Just if you will understand the geometry that is happening in here, then the whole thing will get way easier. So at first I have drawn a really simple plane that I think has a really similar perspective, like direction of the perspective on the side to this wheel. So what I am doing right now is basically I'm trying to find the 4 points of contact, the 4 tangency points, and now I can draw my ellipse pretty much without any problems into this square. So now when I say this square is like a perfect, like if the square contains perfect ellipse, now it's kinda a moment to add a long and a short axis. So basically what I can do is I can draw a long axis, I can draw a short axis. So let's draw them separately at first, because later I will use Photoshop to make them be like exactly in the same, like to have the same center line. So basically the center is in the center. And now I can try to match, to place them in a way that they will be almost in the center. They are slightly like moved in the perspective, but soon I will tell you why. And now I'm trying to find a place where the major axis, the long axis, actually is the longest, and when it comes through the middle. And as you can see, this is pretty much how it goes. So basically, the blue line is the direction of our second vanishing point. So if we were to draw the rest of the box for this guy, this is pretty much how the perspective will behave. It might not be like really easy to understand at first, but once you like grasp the idea of it, and it's pretty much in every single art book that you will find, then it's getting really easy to understand, because the perspective that you will have in here will highly depend on the ellipse that you will start your drawing with, but later I will show you also why, because this is also the theme that is kind of connected to the thing that is called a focal length. But as I said in the previous video, I would like to discuss a focal length in a completely separate video, so I will only like mention it briefly in here. But as you can see now, I have pretty much perfectly drawn cylinder in the perspective, and now on top of those cylinders I can pretty much draw the rest of the tank. So in here I can make a small like gap between them, and then I can try to draw the second like wheel, the second square in the back, by using the method of like projecting the lines through the middle. So if I have a square, and if I were, and I know if this height, like in here there's a point, the half point, the half of the height, if I will draw a line that goes through the middle of this point, then the place where this like line crosses is exactly the place where I get the exactly the same like square next to the first one. So if I were to use it in the perspective like this, I will have a middle point in here, and if I were to draw a line that goes through those middle point, it's better to like go with this line from the top and from the bottom. And now this is like 100% the same square, like this is X in real life and this is X, but it is kind of shorter because it's further away. So this is kind of the way to approach this type of things. And in here, let me connect all those lines. In here I can go pretty much through the middle of this point, because this is like the middle of this whole surface. So nothing really too crazy. If I don't really feel like drawing those lines by hand, I can always use a line tool. So I go through the middle with a line tool in here. And because of this, I know this square in the background will look like this. And the rest of the things that I have in here pretty much go like this. So it's something that is kind of complex, but if you will train like this thing like over and over again, then it really starts making sense. And even if you can see, if you want to draw a really simple thing like this tank, because this is a simple thing, like this is basically a really simple model, you still can get a really like complex geometry for it if you want to like get everything correctly, and if you really want to understand what is actually going on. Because now if I like I kinda can say that I understand what is going on here. There is no problems for me if I will need to draw this tank from the top or from the bottom or from any type of a different view, but later I will just need to clean some of those lines. And pretty much, as you can see, everything in here is kinda already like looking nicely. So to draw the rest of the tank, it will basically be to find the middle of it and try to just draw every single geometry that I have in here. But it will take some time, so, and it's not like our main topic for today, so this is just a way to create a simple block out for the thing that you are going to draw. But this is a really nice thing to be able to do, because later drawing like a really cool tank or a really complex tank works pretty much the same way. And also to go back a little bit to the topic of why the ellipses, like the long axis, hello Demon Envy, and why the short and the long axis are not exactly the same in the perspective. So we can also use the tools for it, like rectangle tool. So let's make it black. You can always use like those things to draw the thing. So now you can see we have two separate layers. We can just adjust them together to the middle, and now we can like rescale it so it will fit. We only will need to rasterize the layers and connect them. We will add the long axis and the short axis. So as you can see from the top, those lines look pretty like normal. They look okay, like the long axis and the short axis are pretty much going through like the width and the height of a circle. If you were to like squeeze it, as you can see, the long axis and the short axis is actually dividing the square right in the middle. So basically the long axis is in the middle, the short axis is in the middle. But if we were to take this thing into the perspective, so actually we will use a perspective for it, and we will kind of go with a little something bit more extreme to make it a bit easier to see. As you can see, this line is no longer in the middle, and it's no longer dividing this edge in the two parts. This is not like, as you can see, the difference between the length of these two things is quite dramatical. And now our kind of like long axis stopped existing entirely. And this is one of the mistakes that I mostly see in the beginners do. They still try to treat this point, like the line of the long axis and the short axis, as the exact middle of the ellipse, when in reality it's actually not the exact point in the middle. So as you can see, if I will place a line that is actually a long axis, it will still be exactly in the middle of an ellipse, but this point in perspective is not actually in the middle. The middle of this like circle actually is in here. It's in the same place as the middle of the square is. So if you would like to draw something that is going from the middle of an ellipse, you will need to start from here, like from this point in here. Like here will be coming some sort of a thing out of it, instead of from here. But if we were to use a different color for the long axis and the short axis, you would see that the shape it is producing is actually symmetrical type of a shape. So let me duplicate this thing, and the length of those things is pretty much the same. So you really need to only be aware of this fact, or the fact that it's happening, because sometimes it might be a bit problematic for you, because you might encounter this problem and the answer why this problem is occurring is not really that obvious. So just remember, in perspective you will also see the more of the front of the circle and less of the back of the circle, but still the ellipse will be symmetrical. No matter what type of perspective you will be using, it will be symmetrical like pretty much always. So this is a thing to really keep in mind, because it might cause some problems like later. And also this was the reason why when we were drawing like this thing, the long axis in here do not necessarily go as the line, as the diagonal line that is going through the square. So sometimes it does, sometimes like the angle will be exactly the same, like will be matching those lines, but usually it does not. So just keep it in mind. And for the things, that I would like to show you how to draw today, like using those methods and everything, will be like some simple vases, some wine bottles, and something that is some sort of a fountain or something like this, because this object may seem to be complicated to draw, but actually they are really not that complicated to draw. And also I will show you a cool small thing with the ellipses that you can do in Adobe Photoshop to help yourself with like this revolved objects. So this is not something that is out of our reach, and most likely if you like understand even the basics of it, you will be able to draw something like this more or less properly in the perspective in just a matter of like 15 minutes or something like this. One of the things that is extremely important is for you to do if you want to train those type of thingies is to actually grab some photos and whatnot and just try to understand, try to search the ellipses, try to draw inside the ellipses all the long axis and short axes. I'm not sure if you say the long and short axes, if there is a like plural version for it, I guess. But we will have like this long and a short axis, and now we can kind of try to match it, try to search for it in this like photo in particular. So let me like show you some examples and whatnot. Basically, I'm eyeballing everything that I am doing right now, and also as you can see, the degree of the ellipses is kind of changing, like they are tilting to the sides, because we are also dealing with a 5-point perspective on a photography, and also we are viewing this thing from the top. So also with those straight lines that we have in here, the first thing that you can notice is the angle of our 3-point perspective, also as something that we will cover like later in the videos, in the next videos. And also, so you can see that the third vanishing point has this angle more or less, because like the short axes are directing our like the angle of our perspective, like 3-point perspective this way. But also you can notice that those lines are creating a curvature, and it's basically the naturally occurring curvature of the perspective, because everything that we see is not actually made out of straight lines, everything is made out of arches, but it's not really that obvious because our brain like is really good at straightening all the arches to the straight lines. But you just need to be aware of this fact, and the whole thing most likely will be way easier for you. Another thing that I greatly recommend for you to do, let me see if it will be working. And why it is not working, why it is not showing. It should be showing. So let me just change the I have no idea why it's not showing, but the long story short is I would like to show you soon. I will try to resolve this problem. I would like you to use some 3D software, even to create some like objects like this, just to play with them in the perspective. And wait, I will need to like to change the source for it. And Rhino. Okay, now it is working. Because if you will be playing with those type of objects actually in the 3D perspective, like in a 3D software, most likely you will kind of get used to looking at all the ellipses. It will be way easier for you to analyze what is actually happening in this software, and you will get a better understanding of the solids and the volume pretty much like instantly, because you will be like looking at it from many different like perspectives. And also that is the topic that is connected to the lens length. You will be able to distort the perspective, so you will be able to see how the ellipses are behaving in different like perspective scenarios, and pretty much how much it can affect the drawing that you will be doing, because this is also a really important topic to be aware of, especially if you are like drawing. So let me just grab a screenshot of it into the Photoshop, so you will be able to see how dramatically those images can vary if you just change the perspective. And this is a topic that will happen over and over again. So let me turn this off. Okay. As you can see, basically this is the difference that you will got with the same image if you will just use a different perspective and a different angle for all the ellipses. But this is nothing that you should be like worrying about now. The thing that you should be doing actually is just getting used to drawing all the ellipses, trying to draw everything like in the planes and whatnot. And later, if you like feel comfortable with drawing those things, you will be able to expand your knowledge about all these focal lengths and everything. Because if you will try to tackle every single thing at the same time from the beginning, then it will get really overwhelming really quickly. Because like drawing in perspective is hard, but it's not as hard as some people think. But drawing ellipses in perspective while knowing what you are actually doing is actually extremely weird, and sometimes it will like result with really weird and different things happening. Because for example, as you can see in here, let's go with the 50 millimeters perspective, because pretty much this is the way we are like viewing the world. So let me turn on the rhinoceros here. As you can see, this looks pretty normal. If you view it from the below, it looks pretty normal, but also notice that we are using 3-point perspective for the preview. So if we were to draw some like vertical lines in here, just for the sake of seeing them behave in the perspective, as you can see now, or let me just draw some cylinders because it's really hard to see the lines actually. So let me make some tall cylinders. If you can see now, they are all going to the bottom because we are viewing the thing from the top. If we were to watch them from the below, they will go to the top because we have like 3 vanishing points at the moment. The top one, the yellow, the green line and the red line, and here like the bottom one, the green line and the red line. But if we were to draw in 2-point perspective without like the third vanishing point, looks what happened with the ellipses when you try to draw them from the top. The first thing is, it's pretty much impossible for you to look at something in 2-point perspective from the above or from the below, because you will get the extreme distortion of the image. And it's all happening because every single like height, so let's say this edge, like the left edge of this square, from this view will have like a fixed height, and from this view it will have a fixed height, and also from this view it will still have the fixed height. So it will always be, let's say, X or something like this, and you will get no foreshortening at all. But if you will go to the perspective actually, then you will have foreshortening. So as you can see, the edge is getting longer if you view it like from the front, but it's getting way shorter if we are trying to view it from the top. And if you combine all of those things with the ellipses, it gets extremely crazy, extremely fast. So just be aware it exists, but don't really worry about it if you are just learning how to draw all this stuff as a beginner. And just try to be open-minded and experiment with all the results that you will be getting, because this is kinda getting complex really quickly. So let's go back to the Photoshop, and let me show you how to draw this type of things, because it's not as complex as it seems to be. So basically I will hide everything that is around to not get distracted. The basic idea is, if you have a horizon line, the ellipse that will be in here will be flatter because it is closer to the horizon line than the ellipse, let's say, let me just disconnect this line from here, than the ellipse, let's say, who will be in here, because it is further away from the horizon line, so we are able to see like more of it. You can kind of imagine the same thing happening with the table. If you will watch the table from the top, you will see a lot of the table. If you were like to place your eyes at height of the table, actually you will see like this much of like the whole table will be like this tall. So this is the basic idea. Of course, the proportion of those ellipses matter, because they can look like this, they can look like this, and this will be also a proper way to draw them. They can also look like this, and this also will be a proper way to draw them. But those things, as I said, will be saved for the focal length video, where I will show you how the ellipses will like determine what type of a perspective you are using. To kinda explain it briefly, if you will have two vanishing points close together, close each other, then the ellipses, if you were to draw a square in it, so if you want to make an ellipse like be tangent to all of those things, then the ellipse will be fat. The fatter the ellipse, the more dynamic the perspective you will get, the closer the vanishing points will be. The thinnest the ellipse is, like lower on the horizon, the further away the vanishing points will be, so just keep it in mind. But as I said, it's nothing that we should really worry about right now. Just keep the idea in mind that the ellipse closer to the horizon line will be flatter, the ellipse further away from the horizon line will be a bit thicker, and that's pretty much all. Like the ellipses above the, let me just connect those layers, the ellipses above the horizon line will pretty much behave the same way, just it will be just mirrored with the horizon line. So this is pretty much the way that we are viewing all the ellipses. But keeping this in mind, if we want to draw a vase, basically what we will do, you can draw the horizon line, but you don't really need to. The idea of like one ellipse being a bit thicker and thinner is kind of enough, but to give yourself like a visual cue, this is how you can approach it. So start with the basic shape of a vase. So let's draw a flat image of it. And you can use, let's say, a symmetry tool. We should do it actually for this guy, so it will be like even drawing. Let me like redraw this line. Okay, something like this. It does not really need to be perfect. And now we want to kinda make it a little bit more dimensional. So the first thing that you really need to be aware of is where is the center line. That's pretty much all. What are the strong points for this geometry? So basically this is this line and this line, because in here the geometry changes its shape. It's in here because this is in a sense a widest place of the ellipse, and is the top part and the bottom part, because these are like the things that we want to draw. And now the thing that you should like pretty much do to make it look nice is you draw a flat ellipse in here, you draw slightly fatter ellipse in here because it's like further away from the horizon line, you draw even fatter ellipse in here, and you draw even fatter ellipse in here. Of course, they should have like a fixed proportion, so they will like change gradually. And this thing right now is 100% eyeballed, but it does not really matter that much if you just want to train this method. Later in the like course, let's say, we will cover the topics on actually how to keep all of these things like nice and tight. The basic idea is the lower you go, the thicker the ellipse will get. The only problem that we will have might kind of come with the ellipse in here, because it's way bigger. So we kind of need to understand the way they behave in the space. So to make it simpler, if we draw some sort of a ellipse on the side, and it will have like a fixed long and a short axis. So to draw it from the top, because drawing it from the top really helps to understand the topic, it will look like this. The important thing with the ellipse is if it's sitting at the same place, like on the same width in perspective, or is it completely in a completely different place in your image. So if we were to draw the second circle, also let's mark the long and a short axis in it, we want to place it exactly on the same line. So basically the middle of the ellipses, let me change the color, the middle point of the ellipses is on the same width. And this is pretty much the thing that we will be doing in here, because it does not really matter if this thing is in here or if it's in here. The important part is that they're on the same like place in space. So if we would like to draw the same ellipse, like the big ellipse next to this one in perspective, the only thing pretty much that will happen, oh, me duplicate it, is this thing will simply get bigger. Like, okay. But the proportion of the short axis and the long axis in relation to each other, so let's say this is y, this is x, so this has some sort of a like y to x proportion. Basically this thing will also have y and x, and the proportion will be exactly the same. So this is the only thing that you really need to keep in mind. So if we were to draw, let's say, let me copy this guy. Well, if this ellipse, we would say in here will look kind of like this, pretty much it's really close how it will look like, then we can make a duplicate out of it and we can just enlarge it. So this is how the big ellipse will look like, almost perfectly. Of course we should adjust a bit, like moving all of the stuff in the perspective, because the middle is not like perfectly in the middle, but with this margin of error that we have, even with the line being this thick, it does not really matter that much. Like you can always kind of eyeball it and it will look fine. So as you can see, drawing this type of a vase is extremely easy. It's just pretty much drawing circles on a flat shape, and it's kind of also the way that the revolving type of thingies are working. So let me also show you how it works in Rhinoceros. For long story short, so let me hide all of these things. So basically, if we were to draw some sort of a shape, let's say something quite crazy with some like lines and whatnot, with some curves and everything, we can revolve it. And revolvement basically says we have this shape, this will be the axis of like of the rotation, and then we can say it needs to rotate for maybe 300 degrees. Okay, by accident I did a 360, but you can see how it is kind of looking like. So if you want to have a nice reference for drawing some like circular type of thingies, using 3D is completely fine, because basically it will provide you a perfect reference to study from. And yeah, this is pretty much how you go with all the ellipses and whatnot. This is like the way to kind of treat them. So if we were to also revolve it once again, or not, let me just select the shape that we used, and let me change the axis, the place of the axis where we will revolve. So in here we will revolve like from this place, and let me do not a full revolve. As you can see now, the top part is kind of different. The bottom part is not existing because it was like going on top of each other, so it did nothing. But with one single shape we can achieve different like geometries, and this is pretty much the cross section multiplied as many times as needed for the drawing to be clear. And also this is one of the things that is really cool to add in the drawings, are those cross section lines. So these lines on here, in here, like 4 is usually enough, because it kind of allows you to see the volume a bit better, because this is kind of the line that direct you throughout the whole thing. So yeah, pretty much this is how you approach drawing those type of things. If you were to draw a bottle, because drawing a bottle is even easier, to be honest, because nothing really is happening in the bottle. It's just basically an extremely simple shape. What you really need to do is draw a flat shape for it. This is basically half the vast majority of the bottle. Then mark the middle one. It's really important to have the middle one, because it kind of will make sure on that you are drawing everything nicely. If you have problems with drawing the ellipses, just draw yourself, let me do it in the colors, just draw yourself a nice rectangle that will be your guiding rectangle. So it will show you how to approach drawing every like section of this bottle. And now just feel, well, this is ugly, this is ugly. This is why you need to sketch a lot, to simply get good at it. Later you can always clean this up, but this is the basic idea on how the ellipse should look like. And it's not the prettiest thing, but it serves the purpose. And in here you can simply flatten this shape out, flatten this shape. So basically you got a really nice cylinder, and this is also the way to draw a cylinder. Also notice if we rotate it, the short axis, as I said previously, is leading the direction for the cylinder, so it's quite easy to understand how it is going. And for the rest of the battle, what you really need to do is draw some sort of a dome, because it has like a dome in here. Draw a really small ellipse in here for the bottleneck. It's not the nicest drawing, but it gets the job done. And boom, pretty much has the entire bottle drawn. Nothing extremely too complex. If you want to add this sticker on it, what will happen is basically you will need to draw an ellipse, like let's say in here, and let's say an ellipse a bit fatter in here. I'm only drawing like the frontal part for it, and that's the only thing that you really need to know about the ellipses. So for the fountain, the same thing will basically apply as a method of drawing. You can draw a cross section. So basically, if you are not sure what the cross section is, try to find some sort of a reference like in here that already has the cross section done nicely. And you can see that this shape, maybe let's draw it from the side, that the shape of this thing basically looks pretty much like this. And to draw this thing in the perspective nicely, the only thing that you will need to do is pretty much draw all the ellipses on this shape, because this is like the basic shape. Well, not vertical, flip horizontal. This is basically the shape for this thing to have in here. So as I said, nothing really too crazy. This one will be a little bit more like work demanding, because you will need to add way more ellipses. But if you are lazy, and sometimes with those type of things you should really be a bit lazier, you can use the tools to help you with drawing everything. So now, as you can see, I'm simply like using the line tool, and I'm just trying to match the angle of every single object that is in here. The problem is the line weight is getting really lost in while using this process, but as you can see, let me just turn off the snapping. But as you can see, drawing even a really complex object in a sense, because the fountain is a complex object, is not really that hard if you kind of know how to approach it. So, of course, my perspective in my drawing is a bit different than from the reference, because I'm not really trying to copy the reference, but I hope you get like the basic idea on how this thing really works like. So boom, 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 and boom. And pretty much this is a pretty good like mock-up for drawing some sort of a thing in a perspective or for a painting, and it took like a minute or something like this. This is not really that complex at all. So yeah, for the ellipses, these are the things that I think you should be really doing. And also this whole video might get kind of like jumping from like a point to point and kind of mixing things up, because there are really a lot of different things that happen when you are trying to draw with the ellipses, and there are really a lot of things that you really should consider while drawing them, because this is the topic that will most likely give you like the biggest amount of problems ever, because it is hard. Like drawing ellipses, understanding ellipses is kind of hard. I have been like drawing them for like many years now, and I still can say sometimes it baffles me how they work, and sometimes to get them right is extremely hard. But if you will actually spend a lot of time to learn how to draw them, then drawing pretty much everything will become way easier. So let me just find reference, because for example, if we find for some sort of a reference for, let's say, a human figure or for something like this, what we are dealing in here with is pretty much the batch of different like shapes and ellipses and geometries. So let's say we can draw a circle in here. We can simplify his arm to a cylinder, because basically this is a cylinder, like just slightly bumped up in here because of the bicep and in here because of the tricep. In here we can say what is the angle of the joints in his arm, like what is the angle of the elbow. We can simplify his forearm, not forehand, to a cylinder. We can simplify like his entire leg, let's say, for a cylinder. And also, if you are not really feeling like drawing figures or you find them really hard, then this is basically a set of some geometries. So like some really simple geometries. So this is pretty much all that is happening in here. Nothing really that complex. The anatomy just and making it look cool is the thing that makes it look complex. The neck and the hand are just the geometries that has a little bit different shape. And later, if you will like develop your abilities to draw ellipses, you will kind of understand the fact that, for example, the thigh or the calves are kind of changing the proportions of the ellipses. So pretty much it's the same as drawing a bottle. So this will be a bit like, let's say, smaller because a knee is closer in here. And then boom, basically by using ellipses, you are able to create some sort of a thing that can be a tie, or a tie. It's a weird word to say. And later, if you know how they work, you can, for example, add some spikes, because basically this is how you add spike. You just follow the line from the middle, and now boom, it was a leg, now it's some sort of a maze. If you want to add another set of spikes in here, boom, boom. Nothing really too complex. Like, definitely you should try drawing as many ellipses as possible. You should try drawing them pretty much all the time, because they will greatly like make everything way easier, but it will take quite a long time to understand them properly. So this is kind of why I also recommend to you to draw them really every day. Try to study them every day. Try to draw every day's like daily objects. So for example, in here I have some sort of a can. So basically this is a cylinder. It's a great reference for drawing. Some sort of a bowl also is a great reference for drawing if you are like kind of intimidated by a more complex shapes. This microphone is pretty much just a cylinders, like with like ellipses with different shapes. This water bottle also a little bit more complex shape, like that is made out of ellipses. And that's pretty much all. I don't know if I will cover anything else in this video, because as I said, it can get really complex unnecessarily quickly, but I think this is like the basic things that you should be aware of while actually drawing like revolving objects or stuff like this, because the next videos will be kinda like compiling all the knowledge that we will get with the basics to actually create something cool, to actually draw something cool. So yeah, just be aware of it. For the 3D software, if anyone is wondering, I am using Rhinoceros 3D because it's a really great software. It allows you to like create really cool geometries relatively quickly. It's kind of hard to like modeling like complex things, because if you want to model something really properly, it will be quite intimidating and quite hard to do. But if you want to just make a quick mock-up out of a 3D, then in my opinion, this is a really great software. But also a Blender, it's also a great type of software to use, and it's free. This one is unfortunately not free, but it's definitely worth checking. So Rhinoceros 3D is extremely cool program with tons of great possibilities. Also, the cool thing is it shows all these cross sections and whatnot, because it is based on NURBS, not on polygons and whatnot. So it's easier a bit to understand the things that are happening in here. So I guess this will be pretty much all for this video. If you have any questions regarding the topic, and if something will not be really clear for you, it will be great if you will ask some questions in the comments, because as I said, this topic is extremely complex and it's really easy for it to get overwhelming quickly. I kind of wanted to show you like the most basic things, but still, if it's not enough, just let me know. I will try to cover some topics in the next videos. So yeah, and in the next video we will briefly talk about the shadows and how to construct the shadows and everything, so you will be able to draw some sort of a geometry, and later you will be able to like apply a shadow to it in a way that will make actually sense and not will be just guessing, but will actually base out of something. And also we will be using a 3D software for it as a point of reference. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Ask any questions if you have any. I will gladly answer everything. And thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next videos in the next week.